Real estate should be in your retirement portfolio. It's really an easy asset class to add. But to hear our thoughts and more on why real estate is important to have in your retirement account, listen to this episode of The Den.
The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Den. My name is Ben Lyons, and today we're going to be talking about real estate in your investment portfolio for retirement and why it makes sense. What are some of the ins and outs? But before we get to that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-host, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul Hammy, the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Groen, and the boss, Shannon Martin Martinez. And my name is Ben. I need real estate in my life, Lyons, to retire. I am a big real estate advocate. I know. It gets cheesier every time. Stop, Paul. Just stop.
I did nothing that time. Absolutely nothing that time.
He tries to keep me off the cheese wagon, but I just keep going there. So, but today, in all seriousness, real estate and retirement, why is it important to have it in your portfolio? If you don't have it in your portfolio, there are some ways to do it, especially if you have a self-directed IRA and some other things. There's some loopholes that that can allow you to take some investment funds and purchase real estate. But why? Why is real estate important to have? And how can it benefit you in the retirement years? So, Aspen, I'm going to kick off with you today.
Oh, no.
I know. Here's the look. There's the look.
Yeah, you got to look down.
Yeah. Talk to me about, why it would be important for someone to consider real estate, having real estate in their portfolio for retirement.
I think real estate is just another facet of, your retirement plan. So you're going to have your stocks, your bonds, your whatever you have with your IRAs, SEPs, whatever you might have. But I think real estate is just adding another layer to that of something that's not really related. I think having a good mix of things in your retirement portfolio is probably a good thing. But what do I know?
Yeah. What do we all know?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, what are we doing? No. So what you're getting at is diversification.
Yeah.
Right. Diversification can be key because if you're relying solely on your 401k and the stock market goes down and you get to the retirement age and you're drawing off of that and the stock market just goes through the floor, you're going to be in a little bit of a pickle if you have all your eggs in one basket. So it's good to diversify. That's kind of what you're leading to. But Paul, talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on retirement and real estate in your portfolio.
Well, in 2008, I was working in the oil field and I had a 401k and I was, we had a company match and I was in the most aggressive bucket. And then we all know it crashed pretty hard then. And I lost probably over $100,000 during that time in that 401k. And by the time I left that company in 2017, I hadn't even recouped half of it back yet.
Ooh.
So I ended up cashing that out to make the transition into real estate and blew through the rest of that money pretty quickly. Real estate has been one of those things that appreciates constantly. I was talking to somebody one time, they're saying, if I buy this investment at $250,000 in 10 years, I'm going to be underwater because of, the way the market goes. And I said, and it was a young couple and their father was with them. And I said, when did you buy your first house? He said 1982. And it was actually the one street over. And I said, how much did you buy it for? And he said, $80,000. And I go, yeah. That's proof right there that real estate, because the thing is you buy it now, you plan for it to be paid off in a certain number of years. And then once it's paid off, then it's definitely an asset that's not costing you much money just to hold on to. You can rent them and make a good income on it. You can sell it and make a lump sum. There are, so many things you could do with real estate in retirement that the stock market scares the heck out of me.
For your taxes too, because you can write off the depreciation with it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of if you are getting more from your 401k, maybe you need to write off a little bit. It could be an offset for that as well.
Yeah. So the depreciation for viewers that may not be familiar with this, but depreciation is done over typically 27 and a half years on an investment property. So if let's just use a round number because I'm a simple person, but if you buy an investment property for $100,000, then you get to depreciate 127.5 of that asset a year. So approximately $3,000 a year goes to offset any gains that you have on that asset. So if you are renting it out and you're making, you're clearing after all your expenses about $3,000, it offsets that gain. So in a lot of instances, to your point, Aspen, you're not paying taxes on the gain that you're making. Now, that's cash flow gain. So, and I want everyone to know we are not financial advisors. Talk to your financial advisor. We're not accountants, but this is just generally speaking to understand some of the concepts. When you talk about cash flow, that's specifically that. Now, when you actually sell the asset and you make a gain on the asset, now that's a little bit different ballgame. And we use a tool we call a 1031 exchange. And it is a tool provided in the IRS tax code that allows you to sell a commercial investment property, or when I say commercial, an investment property, and roll it into another investment property of similar or like, or even an upgrade, and not pay those capital gains. You can defer those capital gains. And a lot of people do that, continue to do it, and never pay capital gains because it's a way for them to increase their portfolio size. So how attractive is that overall, Aspen, the 1031 component? I know you actually have a 1031 exchange company.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that.
I'm a huge proponent of 1031s. I think it's kind of the way I think it was set up for, people that were doing a lot of different things, kind of a tax loophole for the rich, but it's something that the everyday person can use actually really easily and pretty cheaply, which is not the case for a lot of these, loopholes. So it's the IRS 1031. That's the code. And all you have to do, I had someone who actually sold a really big property in Durango and it was going to kick them off their Medicare because they were retired. And so they didn't want to get that whole lump sum, but they didn't want to hold the property anymore. So they sold that property and they split it up into a bunch of smaller properties. And now they can sell, one of those a year or however they decide to do it and not get kicked off their Medicare. So
Brilliant.
That was one of the biggest, best. I was like, well, this is a great idea. This will work perfectly because they were like, we cannot put this lump sum in our account because that 1 year would ruin the whole rest of their retirement.
Yeah.
So, you can say you can just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. You can, and like kind is really loose. You can buy and sell any investment. It just can't be for your personal home. You can go from raw land to a business or fourplex to a single family. It's pretty loose in that regard. It just has to be not for personal use.
Yeah, and there's a time frame.
It is 180 days. You have to close on a house. So you have to name properties within 45 days, and you have to close within 180 days. So if you close on 181st day, you have lost that, and you don't have to use it all either. So if you have anything left over, let's say you sell it for 100,000, you buy something else for 80,000. We all wish those numbers were real right now.
Yeah.
But then so you buy something else for 80,000. You have that 20,000 left over. That's called the boot. And you just have to pay taxes on those 20,000.
Yeah. Yep. Great way to explain it. And thank you for breaking that down in layman's terms because
Love 1031.
I'm a simple-minded person.
Now I get it.
Yeah. Now you get it. We get it. The two guys get it. I mean, you guys are on another level. So you ladies are, but Shannon, talk to us about, cause you have some investment properties. Talk to us about your personal thoughts on investing in real estate and why you hold on to those properties.
Well, the saying is that when's the best time to buy real estate? 5 years ago. It always is because it's always higher. We do see, ups and downs in the market. So they're there. But if you're talking for the long haul, investing in real estate is always going to bring you more money. The perfect example, the guy around the corner, the $80,000 house, obviously it's not worth that after, 20, 30 years. It's worth a lot more. So I always feel like, you do want to diversify. We have IRAs, we have 401k, we have quite a few of those tools. But, businesses can be worth nothing at some point. And, stocks can be worth nothing at some point. Hopefully they all go up. And some of them do great. And people get rich off of stocks they never thought they were going to. So it's not saying that they're a bad idea.
I missed my Bitcoin opportunity, but I mean,
well, you think about people,
but I would have held on to it too long.
You think about people that invested in Yahoo or Google, when it was nothing,
or Nvidia.
And now,
Jeez.
I mean, those people are pretty wealthy. Yeah. So, there is good and there's good and bad in all of it, but real estate's usually never worth nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a pretty safe bet for your portfolio.
Well, think about when you go back to when we had the Great Depression, right? And the stock market crashed. Mm-hmm. Do you know what the number one thing people did to preserve their wealth? They went out and bought assets. A pianos, yeah. A house, something that they could walk out and touch. And what happens is when you have this flurry of inflation, specifically we've had that in the last few years, this inflation that's just rushed the market. Those times of inflation are tough for the everyday family. It's a hard pill to swallow when you go to the grocery store and you're buying a handful of things that's over $100, right? But that same $100 isn't the same $100 we had 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Okay. It's a new $100. However, if you have an asset, that asset is worth now all of a sudden it tracks with the inflation. And so I hate to say this, but there's more millionaires that continue to be made because of the high inflation, even though it's hard on middle class and lower class families, because they have assets and those assets ride out that appreciation. So to your point, if you have a good asset, through times of inflation, that asset's only going to continue to go up. Now, let me ask you this. Do boards, concrete, land, does it get cheaper ever?
No.
I mean, it just doesn't. Even when it spiked during the last few years, the cost of boards and stuff, it settled down a little bit, but there's still the trend is always up. And that speaks to your point. When's the best time to buy a house? 20 years ago. Second best time? Today. So it is something that you should have in your portfolio. And it's really not that difficult to get into the real estate game and buy an investment property. I had a conversation with a financial advisor. This was many years ago in the early 2000s. And she said, Ben, why don't you buy this whole life insurance policy, which there's nothing wrong. I have whole life insurance policies and I've converted term to whole life. And I'm, that's one of my legs. But at the time I said, well, if I have a $100,000 house and I put $20,000 down and this asset pays for itself. So the renter pays me monthly and it pays for itself. And I'm just basically maintaining the asset. Can I take this $20,000 and put it into your whole life policy or into a mutual fund or something and out earn it? And she said, this is the only investment that out earns everything that I offer. And this was Northwestern Mutual. And they're the only company in the last 125 plus years have given a dividend to their clients every single year. And so, they're a strong company, but she was very black and white about it. If you can do that, do that. And it should be one part of your leg for retirement. So if you have invested in a 401k, a SEP, or some of these other things, talk to us about, Paul, you want to take this one? Talk to us about what you should be thinking, because you went through this, right? You cashed in your 401k to transition into real estate. But if you were still working your previous job, what would you be doing, or what would your thought pattern be going toward acquiring a piece of real estate? What would you be looking for, and how would you be approaching it?
If I'm in the market for a rental property, I want to find something that is probably not a large sum of money to get into, doesn't need a ton of repair work, or, I'm not looking to flip a house. I'm looking for something that I can put somebody in there that they can pay me a monthly rent and it covers my, whatever debt I have on the property. My margins are a lot slimmer than other people when I buy it, as long as it's paying for itself and I could put a little bit away for maintenance. That's what I look for. I don't look for, everybody talks about these high cap rates, and, you rarely find them here in this area. But I just look for something that's going to pay for itself, something that'll be sellable in the future.
And relatively low maintenance.
Low maintenance. And one of my rental properties is that way. The other one is not.
Yeah.
That trailer park that I bought is high maintenance, very high maintenance.
And high reward, though, too. You get big cash flow on it.
Yep.
But it's a lot more hands-on.
It's a learning process.
Yeah. Yep. So people say all the time, Aspen, cash flow is king, right? Do you agree with that statement when it comes to, in the lens of, let's just say, like we were discussing, someone that works a normal 9 to 5, and they're looking to get into the game? How important is cash flow, and is that the king? Should they be focused solely on that?
Cash flow is important, but it is not everything. And I think especially now, you see a lot of people who are looking at maybe getting into investing, and you hear the 1% rule. I hear it all the time. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it. Yeah. It's that if you buy it for $100,000, you should rent it for $1,000. If you buy it for $200,000, you should rent it for $220,000 or $2,000. That might have worked at one point. It does not work anymore. I mean, I have one house that fits that. It's just so hard to make those numbers work. And if you stick to those rules, those really stringent, tight ones, I will say it's going to be safe for you, but you're going to miss out on a lot of good deals. And I do like the low maintenance. The one Airbnb that I have out in Aztec, it's 10 acres on the river. It is so much work, but that's something that we're going to love, when we get older, or it's going to be something that really good just holding on to for the land. So even though it's an expensive property, it's a lot of work, it's still worth it, even if we're not making hardly anything or anything on it. Some months we're floating it. With that, I think I said it in the investment podcast, until you have like 10 doors, it's really hard to make the numbers work unless you don't have a mortgage or have an exceptionally low mortgage. Because if something comes up and you need a new air conditioner, you better hope you have some cash flow on that property or in your personal life to get you through that time, because it's going to happen. If you own a property for 30 years, you're going to have to replace all the appliances, the roof, and probably the floors and blinds a few times. So, it's just something you need to expect. But I think you have to look at real estate as a long-term investment. For most of us, if you have 100 properties, 300 properties, obviously you're getting a little bit higher return. But for the average person, let's say 10 or less, you have to really be able to kind of front that. So you do need to pay attention to the cash flow. I think most people do. Not everybody. Yeah. But most people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you actually keyed in on something that I was thinking about earlier. We were actually up at Vicedo over the weekend just to go look at some properties. And we were looking at some land, and I thought, man, there's a really decent price for a lot. If you bought a lot and you put a septic in, put some electric to it and some water, now all of a sudden you have a parcel that you can VRBO out for fifth wheels, right? Or campers or whatever else, and very likely could make that payment. And let's say you were all in on this parcel because it's a very reasonable price. You're all in at $115,000, and you're able to advertise it online, and people can hook up their campers and stay for a few months at a time, and instead of going to the campground. I mean, now all of a sudden you have a property, like you said, with your 10 acres on the river, you have a property that at some point you may want to use yourself. You may want to take up there and build a little cabin on it, or you may want to have a camper, but worst case scenario, you're generating income on that property. So you can also look into places that maybe you desire to be in and see if there's an investment property there. But one other thing is, I was thinking about when you were talking about the trailer court, because I have one myself, and they're a lot of work, but they're little cash cows. I have this little place, this little 3-space trailer court that I've refinanced 3 times. And each time it's paid itself down. So the first time I bought another property with it, and then it paid itself down. The next time I bought another property with it, it paid itself down. And the third time in, I put landscaping in at our house. And so I've refinanced that thing 3 times. And each time, guess who's paying for all of these extra investments? The tenants that are there. And not that that's a bad thing. It's just the way business is structured. So I've used that asset. And guess what? When I pull out debt against an asset, and this is important for our viewers to understand, when you pull debt out against an asset, it's not treated as income. It's debt. And so that's where a lot of these multimillionaires and billionaires get ahead, is because they leverage the debt against the asset, and they don't pay taxes on debt, right? When you pull out a line of credit against your house, do you claim that with the IRS? you don't need to.
Right.
Right. So Shannon, for as far as a long-term play on your properties, do you see yourself at some point they'll be paid off and you'll just be drawing income on that, and then you can refinance the property at some point and use that money for whatever you'd like, right?
Yeah. At this point, we're not, sometimes we make a little bit of money on it. Sometimes we pay a little bit of money on it. It's pretty much a wash, and we're okay with that. Our goal is really, keep him well maintained, keep him paying for himself, get the mortgages down, which they're both almost paid, get that done. And then at that point, they really become a cash flow when I don't have any bills on it and I just have, maybe a small overhead for maintenance and upkeep, things of that nature. And that's really where, obviously we have other, we do have a 401k and we do have IRA and, we've got other arms of income. But when we retire, that should hopefully be a very large portion of our income, which, puts back in what we're not getting from working.
Yeah. So you have the long-term play there. And I just want to remind people, it's so crazy to think about what $300,000 will buy you today in today's market. But just 10 years ago, $300,000 would buy you so much more of a house. So we're not playing with the same $300,000 anymore, or the same $100,000, or the same $100, right? So you have to. A lot of people can't get beyond that. They can't go, I'm not going to pay $250,000 for that rental. And you're kind of like, well, that $250,000 for this rental today's market 10 years ago was $125,000.
Getting cheaper.
Someone gained all that appreciation. So the sooner you can get in the game, the better. Really, time is an important factor. How important is time, Aspen or Paul?
Time, that is actually where I kind of go back and forth, because I pretty much solely invest in real estate. I have a SEP, but that's pretty much it. My husband has a para. But my kids, on the other hand, they all have Roths, because time can make the biggest difference with real estate and with, I guess I don't know anything about the investment. I'd like to do my job, and I like to let other professionals do their job.
Yeah.
So I just tell them what I want, and then they tell me what to do, and I say, okay. And I just put blind trust in people. But time is really important for that kind of thing. And I feel like I almost kind of missed a little bit with the investment. So I'm putting a lot into houses right now. Everything extra goes into buying another house right now, because that's my retirement plan. And I would like to retire sooner rather than later.
Sooner than later, yeah.
So.
Yeah. But you talk about the time value of money, Paul, and let's just say you set up a little IRA for your children, and you invest, $100 a month or $200 a month. Gosh, first 8 years, 9 years is nothing. But year 10, the exponential curve hits, and you don't have to fund it one more penny, and that thing goes through the roof. And so there is value in, having those investments in the stock market, having a diversified portfolio, but also allowing the investment to carry its course. And that's important. So you've talked to me before about your children and setting them up and whatnot. Why don't you expand on that a little bit?
If you get back to the 401k or the Roths, and I think the most important thing is to have somebody that you trust, figure out what they're actually investing in, make sure that whatever fund you're in is, things that you agree with. Because I think sometimes if you just blindly hand somebody some money, then they put it in some of these things and they're not.
I do keep up with it. I look at the statements they send me every
Well, you vetted the person handling your money.
Knowing you, I'm sure you do. But I'm just saying, if you just, you have to have the same investment ideology as the person that's investing your money. Great. Because if they're trying to put it into short-term stuff and then, go to cash after a while and then put it back in when numbers hit certain things. If you don't agree with the way they're doing things, which was my biggest problem with it, because I would be watching it more than him. And, when we were down in a record, stock market's at record highs and I'm at a 12% loss. I'm like, what are we doing?
How do you set your kids up?
Oh, set my kids up. I want to have something I have this idea of generational wealth where I can buy enough properties or buy enough things that if at some point they need to move into one of them, they can. and then I can set them up with good terms on, we don't need to go to the bank and have them hit with these 8%, 7-8% interest rates. I can set them up with something that makes sense for them just starting out. And then eventually when I retire, I can, live off these rents and then hand them over to the kids eventually. That's kind of my retirement plan.
Yeah. Love it. I love it.
I think one thing we always talk about, we always say the game within the game. And I think people always, you see all these clickbaits, get rich quick, this is what you have to do, just Airbnb arbitrage or whatever you're doing, all these things, which sound great in theory, but realistically, long-term investments are going to set you up and your kids up for generational wealth much better than these get rich quick schemes that you could invest everything into and maybe you make a bunch off one and then you lose it all the next one. I would rather see something, maybe it takes 30 years,
right?
But it's going to be there consistently growing and it's going to be dips. But as long as it's dipping in the upward realm, it's fine.
Yeah. You're not staring at the screen every day screaming. Yeah. That goes, if you do that, watch our previous episode of Emotional Intelligence.
Like stepping on a scale every day.
Yeah.
But I would like something for, and I know we're almost out of time, but I would like something for home values and how that works like they do with the stock market. Because I remember when the stock market was at, when Dow was at 5,000 and now we're right around 40,000.
Yeah.
And houses have done the same thing over the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So I think real estate is a proven winner. Yeah. It's definitely an asset to have.
Absolutely. And there are loopholes for people to use their retirement to purchase real estate. So if you are someone that's considering that, I would encourage you to talk to an accountant or a tax advisor, and they can help you with that. There are things called self-directed IRAs. And so, for instance, if you are working at Lowe's for 20 years and then you transfer to Home Depot and you work there for 5 years, well, guess what? All of that money that you worked at Lowe's, they have to keep that separate, and now that can become a self-directed IRA if you set it up properly. So there are some ins and outs to that, and you can use that money to invest into real estate. There are forms that you have to complete and make sure you don't trigger any taxable events and things like that. So again, we're not financial advisors, but there are things that you can do and do some research on it. And then look to get in the game because it is something that can build wealth and it could do it very steady over a long period of time. It's not a get rich quick scheme by any stretch. But we'd love to set you up for success. So let's round out this discussion. We only have about another minute. But just a speed round real quick. What type of properties would make most sense if you were looking to retire, Paul, and you were in a 9-to-5 job? What would you be looking for just real quick?
I haven't done it yet, but I think that 4-3-2-1 would be a good one to start out for a retirement.
So 4-3-2-1, explain that to our viewers.
Well, you start out buying that's usually for just starting out. So maybe in retirement, not so much, but
yeah. But if you were looking to start the seed for retirement, that could be a good strategy, the 4-3-2-1.
Yeah. But you got to start young.
Yeah.
You got to start early because you have to live in one of them.
Yep. And that's it. Okay. Aspen?
I think any property makes sense in retirement. Maybe I think just for me personally, I wouldn't necessarily want a business that I have to be there physically. I plan on whenever I retire getting a property manager for all my properties. So for me, single family, multifamily, land, all of those make the most sense for me.
Great point. Shannon?
I think just starting out for some first properties to buy, I would say probably start with just, one door. You don't want to start with something like what Paul's talking about with his trailer park. I mean, lots of potential there, but if you're just getting started, that might not be the wisest choice. Start with something a little less maintenance, needs a little less attention, just something maybe that can kind of go on a little bit of an autopilot for a while until you get your bearings on it. Great
point. And I'll round us out. I think the 4-3-2-1 method is fantastic. And we're running out of time. If you haven't heard of that, look it up. It's a great way to go. But also I like the BRRRR method where you buy, you renovate, you rent, you refinance, and you repeat. So if I were in your shoes and I was working a 9-to-5 and I was thinking about real estate for a retirement leg, I would look at probably a single family residential property that the numbers made sense. Maybe I'm not making a ton of cash flow or any, it's just paying for itself, but have enough reserves to take care of when a furnace goes out and things like that. But that would be a good way to get into the mix And let me tell you, in a few years, you put that investment in play. Next thing you know, you've kind of forgot about it and you have some options. A few years go by and you go, wow, I didn't realize my asset has paid itself down and now it's worth a lot more. Maybe I can pull out a little bit of money and do some other things with it, or continue to let it pay for itself. There's always options in real estate. So great discussion. Thank you for adding some insight and value, because I think this is a hot topic for people. I think people want to get into the game. They just don't understand how to get into the real estate world. Especially if they're working the 9 to 5, they're focused on their 401k, and that's great. That's one wonderful leg, but let's get you another leg. So if you like our content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to our Facebook page. We put out all kinds of relevant content there. You can go to sjcbroker.com and schedule a consultation with any one of us here at the Lyons Group. We would love to sit down with you and have a conversation and see what we can do to help you with your strategy in real estate. And as always, we thank you for tuning into our episode. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in the Den.